Welcome to the Festival of Storytellers. Welcome to the Festival of Storytellers. Welcome to the Festival of Storytellers.
I can't tell you how excited I am to be on right now. It's been a couple of weeks of excitement, getting prepared, and I've done a lot of things in my life, but this has got to be close to the top.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Kenny Sad Papa Harmon from Dibble, Oklahoma. I have a book that has received multiple 5-star reviews. The book is Sad Papa's Heritage. I got the idea of the book from stories that my daddy told me years ago about our ancestors. The book is a history book. It's very intriguing, some of the stories about my ancestors. The Harmons came to America in 1726, and some of my ancestors became very famous colonial heroes. They were scouts, Indian scouts. They helped protect the forts and settlements in Virginia during the 1700s. And some of the Harmons had some very notable encounters with Native Americans. 5 of my ancestors were killed by Native Americans. The book covers about 250 years of history of my family from 1726 into the 1960s. Like I said, it's a very interesting book, and it's received multiple 5-star reviews. I've been contacted by a couple of media companies about possible movie deals or TV series, and I fully expect that Heritage will be a TV series or made into a movie within a few years. Naturally, I'm very excited about that. That would be a great thing for anyone that loves history and a great thing for my family. I also have 3 other history books. The Early Years, Reflections Part 1 and Part 2. Before I forget it, I need to mention that Heritage is available in audio. I purchased my audio from audiobooks.com. And just recently, my book, Reflections Part 1, Reflections Part 1 has received 4 5-star reviews, 2 from Hollywood Reviews and 2 from Pacific Reviews. The Early Years and Heritage can be purchased from readersmagnet.com. This is the Early Years. Heritage and the Early Years can be purchased at readersmagnet.com, and Reflections Part 1 and 2 can be purchased at writersbranding.com. I have a website. I would appreciate everyone looking at that website. You can look at some of the reviews on Heritage. The website is sadpapasbooks.net. Nice looking website. Last week, I was interviewed by the actor Logan Crawford, and that interview will soon be available on Spotlight Network, also on YouTube, and I'm really looking forward to watching and listening to that interview. Logan Crawford is an excellent actor and an excellent interviewer. Some of his work was House of Cards, Bull. He's been in at least one Brad Pitt movie. Logan Crawford, Spotlight Network. tune in when you get a chance for that. Looks like we're moving right along. This would be much better if I had someone asking questions instead of me just talking. But I guess that's all right. My life was there's someone making a comment. Same to you, JP. You have a great day. Before I became a writer, I was an iron worker. And I worked in 27 different states. I worked all over the country except the Great Northwest. I worked on some very big jobs, arenas, skyscrapers, bridges. For about 40 years, I was an iron worker. It was a wonderful experience traveling across the country and meeting hundreds and hundreds of my brother ironworkers. I retired in 2008, and I started writing in 2016 after the Sad Papaw story. If you're not familiar with the Sad Papaw story, you need to Google and read about Sad Papaw. I wrote in detail about the Sad Papaw story in Early Years and in Reflections Part 1. It was a very interesting story. My granddaughter put something on Twitter, and within 12 hours it had gone across Europe, Asia, Australia. And at that time I wasn't on social media and I didn't even know about the story. And it had gone viral. And I had become famous overnight and didn't know it. And when I did find out about the story, I didn't believe it. But it was true. 10 days after the story hit the internet in March of 2016, we had a cookout. It was an open invitation. We had over 2,000 people show up from 28 different states. And there was one woman there from Australia representing a media company. And there was one guy from Canada. And I believe there was 2 young men from China that were at the cookout. And that was one of the best days of my life, meeting all those people. Just a wonderful atmosphere that day for the big cookout. I've just started my 5th book, Reflections 3. Still working on the first chapter of that. Hopefully, I'll get that finished sometime this summer. And then next year, I plan on doing my 6th and last book, which will cover more of my life after I became an adult. It will be more like a novel than just a book, as I will cover my ancestors once again, going all the way back to the Roman Empire, when possibly some of my ancestors fought against the Romans just after the death of Christ. And that was a battle for Germania. Germania was the pronunciation or the name of the territory before it became Germany. And I'll start the 6th book back then, work forward, go through my adult years as an iron worker, some of the ups and downs of life, 2 marriages to the same woman, 3 beautiful sons, 2 adopted sons, an adopted daughter, and it will be quite a story. I'm sure it will take me probably a year to write that book, and that will be the end of it. 6 books by a sad papa, hoping to finish up next year. Well, I'm about out of gas. 30 minutes is a long time just to talk. I was hoping there would be some questions. It's JP again. JP Abasilla. I believe that's how you pronounce that. JP Abasilla. And he says that must have been quite a journey searching about my heritage. You're right about that, JP. I know more about my ancestors now than I did just a few years ago. I've had ancestors that had one ancestor that founded 7 different churches. I had one ancestor that was a president of a college in Virginia. I had 2 ancestors that were just as famous as Daniel Boone or Davy Crockett in the colonial days. And my great-grandpa, during his time in Missouri before he moved to Oklahoma, supposedly he was an outlaw. And that's possible because he lived in Liberty, Missouri, and Liberty, Missouri is not very far from the old home of Frank and Jesse James. And there was a time when my great-grandpa went missing for 8 months when he lived in Liberty. He didn't tell anyone when he was leaving, and when he came back, he didn't say a word. So the only thing they could figure out was he must have been into something bad. And that was what he was probably doing, was running with one of those outlaw gangs. And he never did talk about it the rest of his life. He lived for at least 30 years after he came back home and never would talk about it. So I've had some very interesting characters through the years. Needless to say, I would have been more prepared if I'd known that I was going to ramble for 30 minutes without any questions. But that's the way it goes with Hollywood, I guess. The show must go on. You just never know what's going to take place. I also had a very good and very interesting interview with Kate Delaney back in October. I really enjoyed talking to Kate. She's a great interviewer. She's interviewed over 16,000 people, including some very famous people like Nolan Ryan, the great pitcher for the California Angels, Houston Astros, New York Mets. I think he also pitched for the Texas Rangers. So Kate has interviewed some very famous people. Also in October, Heritage was on display at the Frankfurt, Germany book fair, the largest book fair in the world. In December, Heritage was in the New York Times magazine. And also Heritage was featured in the Manhattan Book Fair. I believe that was in November. So Heritage has been receiving a lot of publicity. I get a phone call about Heritage from publishers wanting to help me. I get phone calls about Heritage almost weekly. So the book is getting lots of attention. And like I said earlier, I fully expect that Heritage will be made into a movie or TV series or both in the next few years. It would make for an excellent movie and some good stuff for a TV series for everybody that likes the colonial and pioneer history. It would be very good. So if anyone out there connected to Hollywood is watching and listening, shoot me an email. We'll talk about it. Give me a phone call. We'll talk about it. I'll mention again that Heritage is in the form of audio, and I'll just do something entirely different, and we will listen to some of the audio from Heritage.
On the 12th of November, 1788, Henry Harmon and his two sons, George and Matthias, and George Draper, left the settlement to engage in a bear hunt on Tug River. They were provided with pack horses, independent of those used for riding, and on which were to be brought in the game. The country in which their hunt was to take place was penetrated by the warpath leading to and from the Ohio River. But as it was late in the season, they did not expect to meet with Indians. Arriving at the hunting grounds in the early part of the evening, they stopped and built their camp, a work executed generally by the old man, who might be said to be particular in having it constructed to his own taste. George and Matthias loaded and put their guns in order and started to the woods to look for sign and perchance kill a buck for the evening repast, while Draper busied himself in hobbling and caring for the horses. In a short time, George returned with the startling intelligence of Indians. He had found a camp but a short distance from their own, in which partly consumed sticks were still burning. They could not, of course, be at any considerable distance, and might now be concealed near them, watching their every movement. George, while at the camp, which the old man believed the leggings to have been taken from the body of Captain Moore after the Moore massacre. Now old Mr. Harmon was a type of frontiersman in some things, and particularly that remarkable self-possession which is so often to be met with in new countries, where dangers are ever in the path of the settler. So taking a seat on the ground, he began to interrogate his son on the dimensions, appearance, etc. of the camp. When he had fully satisfied himself, he remarked that there must be from 5 to 7 Indians, and that they must pack up and hurry back to the settlements to prevent, if possible, the Indians from doing mischief. And, said he, if we fall in with them, we must fight them. Matthias was immediately called in, and the horses repacked. Mr. Harmon and Draper now began to load their guns, when the old man, observing Draper laboring under what is known to hunters as the buck ague, being that state of excitement which causes excessive trembling, remarked to him, "My son, I fear you cannot fight." The plan was now agreed upon, which was that Mr. Harmon and Draper should lead the way, the pack horses follow them, and Matthias and George bring up the rear. After they had started, Draper remarked to Mr. Harmon that he would go ahead, as he could see better than Mr. Harmon, and that he would keep a sharp lookout. It is highly probable that he was cogitating a plan of escape, as he had not gone far before he declared he saw the Indians, which proved not to be true. Proceeding a short distance further, he suddenly wheeled his horse about, at the same time crying out, "Yonder they are, behind that log." As a liar is not to be believed when he speaks the truth, so Mr. Draper was not believed this time.
That will give you an idea of the quality of the audiobook and the quality of the stories that are in Heritage. As that story continued, there was a famous battle between the Harmons, and as it turned out, there were 7 Shawnee Indians. Now, I've got a question on here about, it's from Julia Valentina, and the question is, I've always been captivated about authors' writing process for memoirs. Can you share about yours? Julia, the writing process, if you've never done any of it, is it's something else. If you really care about good quality writing, it takes a long, long time to put out a good book, because you'll go over it and over it to make sure you've got everything right, all the facts are right. Writing about history is much different than writing about fiction. I try to research everything, reading and reading over and over, especially when it comes to sports. Thank you, Kathy Barnes, for your comment. This is such a lovely way of capturing your heritage. Thank you, Kathy. And it was quite an endeavor to finish Heritage as I wanted it. It took more than 5 years because I kept finding new information. The book was revised 4 times. There was the original, and then the book was revised 4 times. So it was quite an endeavor. But I'm glad I did it. And it was quite expensive, but I'm not concerned about that. It's something that my children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren will always have. And thus far, my family has been very supportive. And there's been quite a few questions asked by my family members. Unfortunately, my great source of information about my family died 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago now. In April, it'd be 4 years since my daddy died. He was 91. He lived through the Great Depression, the Dust Bowl. He was a great source of information about my grandpa and my great-grandpa. But I received a lot of information from some of my cousins, especially Rhonda O'Malley of Cache, Oklahoma. She's the guru of our family. We've got Riley Miller. Miss Riley Miller, how did you manage to capture the dire times of the setting you've written about? As I just said, Riley, I've worked with Rhonda O'Malley, my cousin from Cache, Oklahoma, and she has sent me some very good information, including a book that was written in 1924 by John Newton Harmon. A lot of great stories in that book, and that's where I've gotten a lot of my information from Rhonda O'Malley and that book. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. I think my time is about over. I have 2 minutes left. 2 minutes. This is Jennifer Jackson. Were you ever pressured throughout writing the book? I mean, it's about your family. You must have felt the pressure to beautify your family's history. No, Jennifer, there was no pressure, and I didn't want to change anything. And as far as beautifying anything, I wouldn't change anything. There were some things that I wish had been different, but history is history, and that's what I write. If one of my family members was an outlaw, like my great grandpa was, that's just the way it is. So I like to keep things real. I believe that's the way history should be written, as authentic as the author can make it, with as many facts as possible, being very accurate. I think we're almost finished. I wish I had been better prepared, but I hope everyone has enjoyed the last 30 minutes. And like I said, Heritage and Early Years are available at readersmagnet.com. Reflections 1 and Reflections 2 are available through writersbranding.com. And don't forget about the audiobook. It's very good. I purchased mine from audiobooks.com. We should be about to wrap up. And please visit my website, sadpapawbooks.net. I think you'll like what you see concerning those reviews for Heritage. And we're going to do this again Friday. And Friday, I'll be better prepared. Thank you very much.